Okay, welcome back everybody to the webinar of teaching analytics without coding. And today we have the third session, which is also the last session on FloraPark simulation. It is a data-oriented game to teach supply chain contracts and collaboration. Here, I first want to ask everybody, how many of you actually teach supply chain contracts or collaboration in your class? No, I do. Okay, some people do, some people do not. Yeah, I've been practicing. I think this is, undoubtedly one of the most important topics, right, in supply chain management, both from the research and teaching perspective. And research, the last 20 years, we have seen so many outstanding research coming up in this area. And one problem I find is it's very hard to convey those ideas, right? Those knowledge, those great wisdoms, right, to the students, to practitioners by lecture. So I tried all different methods like case studies or lectures and so on. It doesn't really work, right? If I just tell them the concepts, which is too soft to be useful, and if I get into some kind of models or math, I'm going to blow my students away very, very quickly. So in the end, what I was thinking about is why do I have to teach them, right? Why not just let the student play out the coordination contracts, right, by themselves, right, through some kind of simulation, right? And in this way, they will gain tremendous knowledge and experience in this area as well. So that was the idea, right? Use simulation, right, to let student experience and learn contracts, collaboration by themselves, right? So about 5-6 years ago, so we invented this game, which is called FloraPark simulation, right? Which is a supply chain strategy game, right? It provides it simulates various contracts, such as the push, pull, and the advanced purchasing discount contracts. I will get into this a little bit in detail a little bit later. So students can experiment, right, with different contracts, negotiate, these contracts and see what's coming out. And in this way, right, they can learn how to go from backstabbing, right, which is common in supply chains, right, to win-win, to the which is coordination, right, by themselves. Of course, with I providing a hint and leading them right into the right direction. And this game is also a total business game. That is, the students were playing the C-suite team's perspective, right? The executives of the entire company. So they were overseeing not only supply chain operations, but also marketing decisions, capacity decisions, product strategies, and so on. So they can build a strategic thinking, right? Not just from the silo of supply chain, right? From the entire company's perspective, right? They will practice negotiation, which is extremely important in supply chain management. And also they learn about supply chain competitive strategies. Okay, the FloraPark simulation is an extension of the well-known beer game. Right, I'm sure a lot of people played beer game, right? Right. So the beer game is simulates really order quantities in isolated supply chains, and there are different supply chains, right, serving different markets. So they are not really interacting, and there's only order quantities, right? That is something you have to the orders you have to place, right, to your suppliers. Actually, there's no negotiation at all. But still, the game is very powerful in illustrating, right, the benefits of collaboration. Now, but you miss something, right? In practice, the trading partners in one supply chain negotiate not only the quantities, but also the price, right? The wholesale price, for example. Now, if you introduce price into the game, then it's going to change the game completely because it's going to introduce the conflict of interest, right? Right. The reason being, right, as trading partners in the same supply chain, right, the suppliers always want to raise the wholesale price, right? While the retailers will always want to reduce the wholesale price, right? That puts them into direct conflict, right? So, and this is what the Flora game, which is the FloraPark simulation, captured, right? So in the FloraPark simulation, the ponders in the same supply chain, they have to negotiate not only the order quantities, but also the price. And the supply chains are competing, meaning they are serving the same market, right? So if one supply chain gets more market share, the others will get less. So with the price, with the introduction of price, and so we were putting the partners in the same supply chain in direct conflict. And so they have to really resolve this conflict, right, before they can join their efforts, right, to compete as one team, right, against other supply chains. So the tricky part of this game is that the trading partners in the same supply chain, they have to collaborate ways and fight against each other simultaneously. Does that make sense? Right? Okay, so it's not very tricky. They cannot just collaborate. They have to watch out for their own interest because of the conflict they have with their suppliers or with their customers. Right? It's like bring two hated parties, right, to the same team to fight against a bigger enemy. So if we can summarize the difference between the beer game and the flower game by one graph, it looks like this. Right? So for the beer game, it's all about handshaking. It's only quantities. Sorry. Right. So they have to synchronize their orders and so on to achieve coordination, to share information and so on. But for a flower game, it's much more complicated. Right. It's not only about handshaking. It's actually more about backstabbing. Right. About conspiracies, about cheating, about game playing and so on. So, well, I think this actually is more like real life. All right, now, so let's put the teaching objective in this way. I know this is a little bit dramatic, but actually it is what the game is really about. Right, through this game, the student will learn how to collaborate, right, to win the competition against other supply chains while defending themselves against their possible worst enemy, that is their partners, right? Okay, now, so the key lessons, let me just summarize in high level what the teaching objective would be. So if you do not collaborate, right, if you fight with your partner, everybody is going to lose, right? The supply chain will not win. I play this game so many times, all kinds of different classes, and there's not single instance in which, if they fight, the supply chain wins. Nobody is going to win, right? That is, you either live as one, right, or die as two. That's very, very true here. And the most important lesson actually is if you collaborate too much, that is, you completely give up yourself, right, you share all the information you have and so on, then your supply chain might win, but you may not, right? That is, you may sacrifice yourself for your partner's success, right? By the way, in this game, the teams or the students will be rewarded by their company's success, not by their supply chain's success. I think that's the truth. That's more or less the real life, right? Okay, now through this game, we can cover a lot of different topics in addition to supply chain collaboration via contracts. So we can also talk about supply chain marketing interfaces. I will talk a little bit more about this later. And supply chain competitive strategies, right? And international supply chains, because the story, right, of the game is sitting in the international fresh flower supply chain. So there's a lot of domain knowledge in that. And the students can practice negotiation and teamwork. And guess what? The negotiation is going to take most of the time in the game playing. And finally, strategic thinking from the whole company's perspective. Okay, of course. Okay, sure. All right. So let me just tell you a little bit about the background of the game and the story. So the game is sitting in the international fresh flower supply chain, which I think is actually one of the most interesting and challenging international supply chains to manage. The reason being, it's first of all, it's perishable items, like flowers. You know how long a rose will last after it was cutting off, let's say, from the stem. Do you know what's the shelf life of fresh cut rose? It's about 14 days, 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks of shelf life. All right, it's perishable. And second is because we source 60% of the fresh cut flowers from other countries such as Netherlands, Israel, and Ecuador and Colombia, right? These countries, and the lead time actually is quite long. It could be very long, right? Although we use air freight most of the time, right? It still takes like 13 days, something like that. And during transition, there's a huge yield losses in the importation process. You know what percentage of fresh flowers get spoiled, let's say, in the transition? 35%. So if you import 100 stems of rose from Ecuador to United States, on the road, in the flight, 35% of the rose will just be gone. Okay, will be wasted. So huge yield losses. And of course, it's highly seasonal, right? The demand for fresh flowers is highly seasonal and unpredictable, right? And most of the sales occurred in the holidays. So I was joking with my students, right? I say, if you work in this area as, let's say, if you're a fresh florist, you only have to work 5 days in a year. You only have to work 5 days in a year. You have to take all the rest of the day off, right? And that's because the Valentine's Day accounts for 36% of the sales. 1 day. And the second one is Mother's Day and Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, and so on. Right, so you can see a huge spike of sales during these holidays. Depends on the country. You're right. This is only happens in United States. In other countries, it's maybe a different story. But in United States, you only have to work 5 days in year as a retail florist. Okay, now it's also fresh flowers, right? It also relates to everybody, so it's easy for me to talk about this. People can relate, can to their experience, right? It's close to everybody, and also the competition is very intensive, right? During Valentine's Day, even the gas stations, right, are selling flowers. Okay, and here is the fresh flower supply chain, right? Usually it has two important parties, that is the importers and also the the florists, right? These are the two indispensable players in the supply chain. They bought the flowers from growers at a dirty cheap price. Let's say maybe $2 per stem of rose. But during Valentine's Day, you know how much you can sell for in the street of New York? $2, right, or more, right? So you can see there's a huge profits, right, along this supply chain. I would say in some sense, this is better than drugs, right? So you spend $2, 2 cents to buy a stem of rose and you sell it for $2. So the price increased 100 times. All right, the wholesalers is very important because they're going to clean the customs, the breakage, right, storage and shipping. They are responsible for a significant, right, function of this in this supply chain, and the price they are selling on average to the florist is about 35 cents per stem, right? And as a florist, what would you do? What would you do, right? You do decoration, you do storage, you do selling, right? Okay. Now, this is the fresh flower supply chain, and I'm sure everybody understands the business, right? So it's highly seasonal demand, extremely high gross margin, but the challenge is demand is very uncertain. You have limited shelf life, right? You have intensive competitions, right? How many of you want to get into this supply chain? Right, drugs and roses. You're absolutely right. Right. Okay. Right. At least there are high high gross margin, that's the same for both drugs and flowers. Now, so we're going to put students in multiple fresh flower supply chains, right? And each supply chain, we have a florist, team, and also we have an importer team, right? Both parties are indispensable, right? The importers will secure supply, and the florists will generate demand, right? And they are competing in the same market, right? So their price, their marketing actions will affect not only themselves, but everybody else. Okay, and so this is in one supply chain. If we look deeper, right, if we zoom in, we'll find out, right, they're going to serve 3 different market segments, such as institutions, right, that is the conference, that is the wedding house, right, and empty nesters, right, parents with their kids, grow up and gone, and finally gift givers, such as the lovers during the Valentine's Day. Right, with 3 different product lines, right? The high end, the lower end, the middle end. And the florist will make marketing and pricing decisions, try to influence the demand, right? And both the importers and the florists will make decisions on sales and operations planning, such as how much to buy, right? How much capacity allocation, and also how much money they're going to spend on operations excellence, right? To train their workers, to improve to buy new machines, right? And so to improve the quality of the product and reduce cost, Lean Six Sigma, and that kind of stuff, right? And also they have to get together to negotiate supply chain strategies, how much they buy and what price, and so on, right? So these are all the decisions they have to make, right? It's a game, right? Every supply chain has 2 players, right? They have to negotiate and work together or against each other, right? Whatever that they like to do. Right, the sequence of events is something similar to what we write in our research papers, right? So like a 2 periods game, right? 2 months, let's consider Valentine's Day, right? 2 months in advance, and the florist will place the first order, that is the advance order, right? Which is X1, and the price and the discounted price, which is W1, right? The importer will then get ready, right, for this, right, confirm the deal and source, materials from outside growers, which is Y, how much they're going to purchase from the growers. Now, during the Valentine's Day, right, the florist may place the second order at a higher price, which is W2, right, which is the emergency order at emergency price, and the importer, right, will fulfill that order as much as inventory is available. So if the importer has extra inventory or backup inventories, he's going to fulfill that order. If it does not have, that's fine. There's no second order, right? So as you can see, if the supply chain partners negotiate different X1, W1, or W2, you're going to come out with different type of contracts, right? For example, right, if there's only first order, if there's no second order, right, that is the advanced order, right, which is the push contract. And the florists will hold inventories and wait for demand, and there will be no second order. Or if you don't have the second, if you only have the second order but no first order, right, they could do that, set X1 equal to 0, and that will be the pull contract, which is the last minute order, right? So in which the florist essentially push inventory back to the importers and order only as needed during the season, right? So there will be only second order. Does the florist have to get a better forecast over time? Yes, I think so, because they have the demand data, right? If they share the demand data with the importers, the importer will have the same visibility, but if they do not, well, that happens very often, and importers will have no idea what is selling, what is not. Right, so, and the benefits and pro and cons of these strategies would be, right, for the florist, right, advance orders, which is push, right. In this contract, the florist will get price discount, also guaranteed supply. However, he's going to carry high inventory risk, and also it requires a lot of money upfront, which is a high budget requirement. Right, the second strategy, which is last minute order or pull strategy, right? In this one, the florist will require less budget and there's no inventory risk. However, the florist completely gave up its inventories or supplies to the or decisions, right? To the importers, he may suffer short supply and higher cost, right? So as you can imagine, right, the third, which is the optimal strategy, would be a hybrid strategy, right? Which is the combining these two strategies together. They not only place the first order, but also place the second order at different price, right? Which is the advanced purchasing discount contract. I think Kashon has a paper on this. Many people has wrote about this, which is great, and we understand this very thoroughly. The question is, how do we convince this idea to students, right? And okay, so here is the screenplay, right, for the game. And later I'm going to invite everybody to join us in playing this game a little bit. So it actually takes about 6 to 9 hours to play this game. And you know which part of the game take most of the time? It's negotiation, supply chain contracts negotiation, right? They are all so firm on the price. So then bring really intensive conflicts to the players in the same supply chain. So I typically will start it out. I typically play 6 rounds, right? Which takes, we also play this with the executives. We have them, sitting in the hotel and we just have a, intensive 1-day executive sessions. So I will start it out by introduce the game and also supply chain challenges before the first round. And after the first round, I'll talk about strategic thinking, right? And supply chain marketing interfaces. How do we make joint decisions? How do we consider, right, both marketing decisions and supply chain decisions together? Right. Then I talk about teamwork and group decisions because there's a lot of data, right? You have 3 markets, 3 different product lines to consider. So it's quite data intensive. They need to assign different works to different players so they can join the force. So group decisions is important here. And after the third round, we'll talk about supply chain, coordinating supply chain by price and quantity contracts, right? Those push-pull and advanced purchasing discount contracts that tells them, give them hint, right, on which direction to go, what they should do. And then I talk about supply chain competitive strategy, right? How do we compete with other supply chains? Now, lastly, I will talk about negotiation.
Excuse me. Can I ask a question? So how long does each round take in terms of the time?
1 hour. As short as 45 minutes.
So like 15, so they are all the same, you run them the same amount of time. So 15 minutes, you give game intro and supply chain strategies, 45 minutes then play, that's like again 15 minutes, 45 play and so on, like that?
Something like that, yes. So for students, initially, it takes them about an hour to really understand the game and come up with the numbers, and especially negotiate with their partners. As time passes by, they really understand how the game works. Then I will put more time into explanation, into an interactive session. Right, but roughly speaking, about 1 hour each round. I sometimes play this off class. So I'll set the time, say everybody, please submit your orders, your decisions by this time, right? 2 days, let's say. So it's up to them to find time to negotiate to play with the game. Right. So the reason for these interactive sessions is I want them to play, right? And then learn how to play better, right? And then to practice the skills they learned, right? So in this way, they can learn immediately. And you can see the effects very, very quickly. Okay, so after the game, I'm going to show them the game trajectory, right? Like their cumulative profits, their marketing expenses, their market shares, and so on. So they can relate their experience, right, they can find the causal relationships between what they do and what's coming out. And also after the game is over, I'm going to have a reality show, in which case I'm going to invite all players, right, all partners of the same supply chain coming up to talk about their strategies and their experience, and also ask them each suppliers, right? Ask the suppliers to give suggestions, right, or opinions to their customers, and vice versa. And this is the best time of the game because you get all the competitors, right, of the same market together to talk about the strategies, to share their experience, and to criticize each other. And it is hilarious. Okay, let's see. Can the importer strategically always hold a great delivery quality at this speed they can sell? Oh, no, you cannot. If you place the order, and if the demand comes in and you have to deliver the order, but however, you can buy a little bit more inventory just in case, right? If your customer need more, right, during the season, because he's going to pay a higher price for that. Okay. Can import a strategy? Okay. All right. So I will play a few rounds and we'll see what happens. Okay. And here I just want to mention one more thing before we get into the game. Right. I don't know how many of us actually teach supply chain marketing interfaces, right? But it is actually very, very important to join the decisions, to make joint decisions on supply chain, on supply and demand generation, right? Because I'm sure almost every company has limited budget, so you have to decide where to spend, right? And spend on generating demand or spend on securing supply. Because both parts are very, very important, and you have to match them up, right? So if you spend a lot of money on generating demand, but you don't have enough supply, right, you're going to let your customer down, which is very bad, right? And vice versa, right? The other way around. So if you spend a lot of money, secure supply, you buy a lot of inventories, but you don't have much demand for that, it's also a total waste, right? So you really have to match them up and consider carefully, right? The supply chain marketing interface. All right. So, and here's the game. And I would invite everybody, if you're interested, let's join us and play a few rounds. Let's see, we make some friends. Okay. And here is the game interface just before I switch. So we have two boxes here, right? We have the florists, we have the importers. How do I pair them up? By sequence, right? The first, right, email for the florist, right, will be supplied by the first email in the importers, right? And the second, so let's say this is the red supply chain, and here is the blue supply chain, right? So the second florist will be supplied by the second importer, right, in this box. So any questions before getting into the game?